as they let him off, they made Simon, a man from Cyrene, who happened to be coming in from the countryside, carry the cross behind Jesus. A huge crowd of people followed, along with women weeping and carrying on. At one point, Jesus turned to the women and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, don't cry for me. Cry for yourselves and for your children. The time is coming when they'll say, 'Lucky the women who never conceived. Lucky the wombs that never gave birth. Lucky the breasts that never gave milk.' Then they'll start calling to the mountains, 'Fall down on us,' calling to the hills, 'Cover us up.' If people do these things to a live green tree, can you imagine what they'll do with dead wood?" 2 others, both criminals, were taken along with him for execution. When they got to the place called Skull Hill, they crucified him, along with the criminals, one on his right and the other on his left. Jesus prayed, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." Dividing up his clothes, they threw dice for them. The people stood there staring at Jesus, and the ringleaders made faces, taunting, "He saved others. Let's see him save himself. The Messiah of God. Ha! The chosen. Ha!" The soldiers also came up, poked fun at him, making a game of it. They toasted him with sour wine. "So you're king of the Jews. Save yourself." Printed over him was a sign, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals hanging alongside cursed him, "Some Messiah you are, save yourself and save us." But the other one made him shut up. "Have you no fear of God? You're getting the same as him. We deserve this, but not him. He did nothing to deserve this." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you enter your kingdom." He said, "Don't worry, I will. Today you will join me in paradise." By now it was noon. The whole earth became dark, the darkness lasting 3 hours, a total blackout. The temple curtain split right down the middle. Jesus called loudly, "Father, I place my life in your hands." Then he breathed his last. When the captain there saw what happened, he honored God. This man was innocent, a good man and innocent. All who had come round as spectators to watch the show, when they saw what actually happened, were overcome with grief and headed home. Those who knew Jesus well, along with the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a respectful distance and kept vigil. I wanted to lead this week with the gospel reading, because my great fear is that through 2,000 years of church history and doctrine and dogma, we've over-spiritualized this story. We have turned this absolute brutal crime, this crucifixion, into a nice, neat little piece of theology, topped off with a universal, clean image of the cross we ironically dip in gold and we wear around our necks. We say Jesus' death was inevitable, was necessary, and this happened to be the vehicle that God used. It's become something we believe in, something for the hereafter. We worship Jesus rather than follow him. But if you read this story, and I mean really read it, without the filter of church doctrine, this story of the crucifixion of Jesus to me sometimes looked like a brutal, absurd tragedy. And I encourage you to go back and read the first half of this chapter. I was going to read all 53 verses, but then by the time we put the sermon in and we ate, lunch would be getting a little late. So that's your homework. Go back and read the first half of this chapter, because it covers the trial of Jesus. Jesus, he's ticked off the wrong people with all his talk about this kingdom of God business one too many times. Perhaps his ability to work miracles made him something to fear, though it seems he always uses his power to heal and never for force. Maybe it was the symbolic act of driving the money changers out of the temple, threatening to disrupt the cash flow of the religious institution. Even today, watch what happens in a church when the tithe flow gets interrupted. People get nervous. The thing is, Jesus really hasn't done anything wrong, at least nothing worthy of a capital offense. So those in power do what those in power always do when their influence is threatened. Anything they can. They charge him with sedition and treason. And they take him to the Roman governor, and the Roman governor examines him, and he says, he's just a crazy old street preacher. Why in the world are you bothered by him? And he wants to release him. But these religious authorities, no, they're still threatened by this Jesus, and they won't hear of it. And in a bitter twist of irony, a criminal, Barabbas, who was actually guilty of sedition and treason and causing a riot, is released. And Jesus is condemned. All the while, the crowd, who only the week before had welcomed Jesus into Jerusalem, waving palm fronds, saying, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord," have turned into a violent lynch mob with shouts of, "Crucify him!" For that is what it is, a lynching. They even string him up from a tree. Mob justice at its finest. The crucifixion of Jesus offends me. It isn't a noble death. It isn't a martyr's death where someone heroically takes a bullet for someone else, when someone takes a punishment so someone else can go free. The disciples have already escaped. It was a lynching, pure and simple, largely pointless from the point of view of the world, driven exclusively by fear. At what point do you ask yourself the question, what am I dying for? Like a lynching, there's almost a carnival-like mentality going on. It isn't the somber affair we often picture in our movies and things like that, but it's a celebration, a chance for a street party. We, the world, have won. We can now rest easy because the social order has been restored. By killing this man, maybe everyone will learn to keep their place. They've hanged this man on a tree, all the while taunting him. If you're so right and we're so wrong, save yourself. Oh, how twisted humanity is that we would make sport of a person's death. What are you dying for, Jesus? It's like a bully. If you are who you say you are, then come down off that cross and show us a thing or two. They arrogantly question Jesus. In their mind, he is no Messiah. He can't be the chosen one of Israel. No Messiah would allow themselves to be crucified like a common criminal. And if the Messiah is to die, then he should die in battle, laying down his life for a noble cause. This fellow allowed himself to be executed. Now at the same time, the disciples and the women followers of Jesus stand off away from the crowd. They want no part of the show. And yet, this is their master, their teacher. The one they had spent the last 3 years of their lives with. The one who time and time again healed people of their diseases and taught that a better kingdom is coming soon. Is this really how it all ends? It's almost a surreal scene for them. They are in shock and have fears that anyone else might notice them at any moment. But they can't leave him. They had this sense of disbelief. This is not the way this kingdom is supposed to end. What are you dying for, Jesus? For his followers, the question is tinged with shock and disbelief. This can't be happening. It isn't supposed to end like this. This is the question that so many people ask themselves today when confronted with unforeseen tragedy. What is happening? What am I dying for? Jesus asked this question in the Garden of Gethsemane just before his arrest and trial. He asked it of God the Father. He is afraid and wrestles with God that if there is to be any other way to accomplish this work, any other way at all, then he would prefer that. And yet, even if there isn't, he will go willingly. As he hangs on the cross, he cries out for God to forgive those who crucified him. Father, forgive them. They're just poor humans who don't know any better. He asks that they be forgiven even though they don't ask for it. God would rather die than kill his enemies. Whoa. That's some dangerous theology. Nevertheless, it is there. Jesus pardons those who don't even ask for it. One of the thieves crucified beside him sees this, hears this, and gets it. Hours before his own death, he sees this Jesus for who he really is. This life for what it really is. Remember me, Jesus, when your kingdom is finally realized. When it comes to full fruition. Will you remember me, Jesus? Jesus says, have no fear. For this very day you will be with me in paradise. So in the midst that all that is happening to Jesus, he forgives those who crucify him and a deathbed conversion of a thief on the cross. This is what Jesus is dying for. Even in his death, this kingdom that he spent his whole adult life teaching about, he does the unexpected. He is dying because for the only way that the new can come is for the old to pass away. All things are being renewed. That's next week's sermon. My question for you today, what are you dying for? I've heard that expression used so flippantly. I'm just dying for a new car, or a new house, or a new fill in the blank. What are we sacrificing the precious minutes we have on this earth for? I know people who quite literally work themselves to death to have the latest and the greatest things, to live in comfort. They're quite literally dying for stuff or position or power. You see, we humans, we like to put off thinking about death. We put it off as long as possible, somehow fooling ourselves into thinking that this life, the way that it is right here and right now, will simply go on forever. But if we really take the time to pull back this thin veil, we have to face the hard truth that none of us are getting out of here alive, at least not in this form. So that begs the question for those of us who follow in the way of Christ, what are we dying for? What are we going to do with the limited amount of time we have left in this particular form, whether it be 10 or 70 more years? What are we sacrificing for? Is it merely to give ourselves creature comforts for the limited amount of time we have left here? Or is it something bigger? In wrestling with this question, what are we dying for? We are simultaneously asking ourselves the question, what are we living for? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is next week's sermon. You'll stand. Dear Heavenly Father, I love you so much, and I thank you for this day and this season of Easter as we kind of take a moment to pause and reflect on our lives and your sacrifice for us and what it means. And my prayer is that we would ask ourselves the question, what are we dying for? What are we sacrificing for? What are the things that matter? And my prayer is that you would allow us to honestly take assessment of ourselves, God. That we would look to the way of Jesus, who said, follow him. And we would be willing to lay down our lives for something bigger than ourselves. Amen.